The U.S. Supreme Court yesterday, which would have been September 21st, entered a stay in the Slaughter v. T-Rump case. And a lot of people are saying, well, what even is that? Good question. This is a bit complicated, but there are a ton of lawsuits that have been filed against the administration for terminating certain people from certain positions. Now, in the federal government, there's some guarantees. It's not all at will. And that's because of how Congress set up these different boards and entities. And Congress said, well, we wanted to kind of be bipartisan if possible, to pull the politics out of it as best as we can to focus on the issue at hand. So the National Labor Relations Board, the Federal Trade Commission, those kinds of things. They're like, we don't need to be hiring and firing every couple of years for political reasons. At least that's what we thought. So Miss Slaughter was on the FTC commission, and the president's like, you gotta go. District court said, no, you don't. Let's work through this. And then the Supreme Court yesterday was like, no, you can fire her and also work through this. All of this hullabaloo has to do with a case called Humphrey's Executor, which set out this standard that's supposed to be used when you have a federal commission or a created bit of the government, so some kind of board or commission, and whether or not the president can just fire them at will, or if there has to be some reason, some just cause for actually firing them. It couldn't just be because you felt like it, because it was Monday. So Humphrey's Executor's been good law since the 30s. And this is Humphrey's Executor versus U.S. Here, there's a citation. And this case, again, 1935, it's actually controversial. It's kind of gone back and forth in the courts. We've got several different cases that came after it, trying to see what we really want to do. What you want to look at here is number one, the Federal Trades Commission Act, which is what we're talking about for the Slaughter case. Fixes the terms of the commissioners and provides that any commissioner may be removed by the president for inefficiency, neglect of duty, or malfeasance in office. Held that Congress intended to restrict the power of removal to one or more of those causes, citing that case down there, distinguishing it from this issue. You can't just fire them for no reason. You need to have some kind of a reason in order to pull somebody off of the FTC. Now, you might think, well, why? Why does the president have that kind of power? Well, it's set under the Constitution. This is the Appointments Clause. Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2. He shall have the power by and with the advice and consent of the Senate to make treaties, provided 2/3 of the senators present concur, and he shall nominate and by and with the advice and consent of the Senate shall appoint ambassadors, other public ministers and consuls, judges of the Supreme Court, and all other officers of the United States, whose appointments are not herein otherwise provided for, and which shall be established by law. But the Congress may, by law, vest the appointment of such inferior officers as they think proper in the president alone, in the courts of law, or in the heads of departments. So there's the Appointments Clause, and, it's subject to interpretation. The truly big issue here is we have to look and see, what is this board or commission doing? Is what they're doing kind of a legislative situation? Is it more administrative? Is it judicial? What's the purpose of the board? And so each different entity needs to be assessed at that level. Because in the end, we're talking about whether or not the executive branch can pull somebody off of the commission or the board. And that is possible for the president to do if that board is covered under the executive branch powers. So without getting too far into the weeds, too late, the Federal Trade Commission is set up, and the people on the commission are put there by the president with Senate approval. That's how it is, because the FTC is seen as putting officers onto these boards and commissions. So the president has that power. So then the next step is, does the president have the power then to remove them without cause? Now, Now, that's not mentioned in Article 2. If you go through the FTC Act, you'll see the different roles the president has for putting them there, but not necessarily for taking them off. There is some more language in Section 5, and I'm not going to get into the weeds there, at the Slaughter case that went up to the U.S. Supreme Court yesterday, where the U.S. Supreme Court said, we're going to go ahead and let you fire that person, and we'll proceed through our regular civil process here, but they're out of a job. Now, we all know with the winter elements, when it comes to an injunction or putting a stay into place, that if one of the pieces is most likely to win on appeal, and that is one of the elements. And so when you do your analysis, you're like, well, maybe this is a win then. Well, partially. By the end of all of litigation, that's when the decision will come out, not just, midsies. So they did go ahead, though, and allow for it. So it gives us a little bit of insight into where the Supreme Court is, because the true question is the Supreme Court going to overrule Humphrey's executor? Now, this particular case, I haven't given you a lot of details, but it was a fella. He was being fired by Franklin Roosevelt, and his estate basically sued for back pay for wrongful termination. That's why it's executor. So he's like, I didn't want to go. You kicked me out of the FTC. Roosevelt's like, get out. I don't like you. And then and then his estate was like, you owe us some cash here. And that's where we have this decision coming out of, where the Supreme Court unanimously is saying we need to have a couple of things in place, depending on what kind of commission or board it is, to make sure that this isn't just purely political. Because, we got to get stuff done at the federal government level. It can't just be, here, you're hired, you're fired, you're hired, you're fired, and then we wouldn't get anything done, because the first couple of years would be spent with the new president firing everybody, hiring all new people, and then 2 years later, it would happen all over again. So there are some just practical reasons why it's important to have some kind of a structure in place if you're going to fire somebody who's been appointed to a commission or board or something like that. And here you go. This is what the court issued on the 22nd yesterday. Basically just saying the district courts hold off on the firing. That's paused until we go through the whole process. And you can see here, Justice Kagan, not happy about it. So she does write a dissent here. It's a few pages. You could take a look at it if you're interested. But we don't have a lot of information other than the Supreme Court's asking for specific questions to be briefed by the parties, and that will be required. What's going to happen here? 90-year precedent overturned? It's possible. We'll have to wait and see.